So for the better part of 10 years, I have been in product design and had a stint of about a couple years on the Etsy product design team that was about 140 people. I learned some really critical things about the product design cycle, and I wanted to break them down in this video and talk about the 5 things I learned during my time at Etsy, how you can then take them and go apply them to either the organization that you are in or just further develop your design career, and give you a little inside look into how larger design organizations look at design and how they're thinking about things. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, stick around and we'll talk about it in the video. First one up here on the list is how small changes at scale make a huge impact. What seems pointless is pretty significant when you 10x to a 100 million plus a year business. And so, for example, when I was there, we spent about 6 months iterating around text sizes, the color of texts, the position within like 3 or 4 order of hierarchy lines. We spent with the size of the elements, like all within this tiny little buy box of like 4 lines of copy. And it's crazy that we spent so long, but at the end of it, that ended up leading to driving up $50 million in revenue from just moving around some text and from like reducing sizes of fonts and shifting around their position within a small period. And it was something like 0.025% or something ridiculous. But when you extract that to a multi-$100 million a year business, that leads to millions and millions and millions of dollars. And so when you reach scale, like those small decisions do make a huge difference. Another huge thing that I observed during my time there was how meticulous they are at paying attention to the details. One of the things that they did really religiously and meticulously was making sure that when they ran user tests, that the content was as real as possible. So much of the time prior to those tests was spent making sure all the copy was proper, all the recommended items were actually as close to real as what they would be, that the pricing was correct, that the image photography was correct, and making it just as absolutely close to the real thing as possible, that so when people gave their raw reactions, that it was about as close to authentic as it could possibly be, right? As you can imagine with a e-commerce platform and marketplace like Etsy, if the recommendations didn't feel correct or the pricings were super far off or something else on the page just didn't feel correct, like that can skew a lot of someone's opinion. And it also, we noticed, it would get people distracted. And so like, we would have multiple different designers there that would basically be gut checking to make sure that all those little fine tuning details were absolutely correct before shipping that prototype out to be tested. It just helped prevent a lot of false positives. So Etsy also excelled at knowing when to stop mining the same vein. And what I mean by that is they knew when it was time to hang up the cleats on a specific experiment because it had been done so many times and it wasn't producing the results they want. And so oftentimes what people say and what people do are very different, right? And they drive different results. So I remember running these experiments where we would put recommended items all the way at the top of the page before even showing them the product that they were looking at, to help to stimulate browsing, to get more purchasing, to drive up conversion rates and all of that good stuff. And always when we would test it, people would say, that's really distracting, that's annoying, I do not enjoy that. But then the other way around, when we would go look at the metrics, it would always lead to more purchases and better conversion rates. And it would always lead to a more positive outcome for Etsy. And so even though we tried so many different approaches to move it out of that top position to lower down the page or in a hidden panel or into a different sort of like part of the experience, it always hurt conversion rates significantly. And so we realized just after about 8 rounds of just trying things that it was like, it seems like this is time to hang up the cleats on this and on the experiments and just decide like, hey, for now, this is the best approach that we can do, and maybe some years down the road we could revisit it, but right now we've done so many rounds of the same thing, it's just like beating a dead horse. And so that was one of the things I observed, is they were very good at like pulling the plug when they felt the experiment had been kind of maxed out, and just moving forward with that. Another thing I observed was the risk taking that they eventually got to. If you're always playing it so conservatively, the chances of you getting to that outcome that you want in a decent amount of time is pretty unlikely. And so you have to make larger changes to drive bigger impacts. And that kind of goes without saying, but it was something that when I first got there was not always the case. But then over the next 2 years of me being there, I noticed that their methodologies started to shift because they started to notice more and more about the results. So that was just another kind of interesting observation. And then the final one here on the list would be that always think about the business. If a design, a product area, a channel of work, whatever have you, did not directly correlate to some sort of business metric, it's never going to get prioritized at Etsy. And that was so paramount, because unless we could strictly tie something to their tried and true North Star being conversion rates, it never got pushed live. It never got, say, absolutely go. It was so hard to convince people around the business that anything other than conversion rate was going to be worth time. And it was just so interesting to see how hard and fast they were about making sure that it was tied to conversion rate. Like, even if there was other kind of supplementary metrics that it drove, the chances of it actually being pushed to all of Etsy.com was so slim to none that it almost never happened. So they would run tons of experiments. They'd move some metrics positive, some metrics would be neutral. But if it didn't have a significant impact to conversion rates, it rarely got pushed to all of Etsy. So that was kind of my 5 takeaways from seeing a huge design team, and kind of what I observed for methodologies of how they think about things, and not so vague, but these are more like really, really tactical things that I observed, not just the surface level stuff. So now let's talk a little bit about how you can take these to your own business or to your own organization and think about things a little bit differently. The way I think about these is a few key things. Track data early. The more and more you know about your users, their behavior, and the customers, the better off you'll be. I always think about 2, 3, 4, 5 steps down the line. What does this design that I'm doing impact future? And then it is pay attention to the details, because you will always get more accurate results if you are being detail oriented. And so if you don't take anything else away from this, take those 2 things away: to pay attention to the details and make sure you're always thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 steps down the line, because those little changes do make a difference when you compound all that stuff. So hopefully you found some value in this video, and you enjoyed it. So if you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate you being here. Hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next week. Peace.